Good evening to all of you, and welcome. This group called the Shoreline Eldercare Alliance, better known as C, is sponsoring this event as part of a series that we have been sponsoring over the last few months, and it's all been entitled Seniors Take Charge. We had one presentation in January where we had people speaking about seniors taking charge of their finances and their legal documents. And in February, we had a presentation by Bev Kidder from the Area Agency on Aging on knowing your benefits and knowing what is not your benefits. And this is the third presentation, which is put yourself in charge of your own healthcare. Just a little bit about C. We are a group of about 19 people who provide elder senior care in one way or another on the Shoreline. And about a number of years ago, now I think it's about 6.5 years ago, about just a couple of us, 4 of us maybe, got together and decided that we really needed to invest ourselves in education because so many people did not know about any senior services, didn't know how to prepare for entering that phase of life. And in fact, many people were waiting for a crisis before they made any kind of decisions about their senior journey. And we know that making a decision in a crisis is not a good thing. So we began to invest ourselves in education. And every year now we have a number of larger, this type of presentation, beginning in the fall with a senior fitness day that we do at the YMCA in Brantford. And then various topics. And then in May, every May, and this was the first thing we ever did a number of years ago, we have what we call a celebration of healthy aging. And we did this because people were so reluctant to say they were seniors or to want to know anything. And we said, well, let's have a party and bring all these seniors together and show them not only good speakers about entering senior journey, but also wonderful senior entertainers, wonderful senior artists, wonderful senior musicians, and wonderful food and speakers, of course. And so we've had that every May, and we now have it at the O&Ego. Last year, I think we had 400 people go through in the course of a day from 2 o'clock to 7. And we're going to do that again this year, and it's going to be on May 21st, from 2 to 7 at the O&Ego Beach and Tennis Club in Brantford. Pardon me?
No charge.
Oh, and it's no charge, okay. It's a free event.
Where is it?
Pardon me?
Where is it?
At the O&Ego Beach and Tennis Club. Well, we'll tell you where it is later. Okay. So that's a little bit about C. I just want to take a moment to have all the C members who are here stand, please, if you're a member of C. Okay, so we have some of the people represented here tonight. We have Stephanie Eriker, raise your hand. She's from Orchard House Medical Daycare in Brantford. Christy Bondos from Comfort Keepers in Guilford. Sylvia Patterson, who is actually the president, co-president of C now, and she's from the Guilford Savings Bank. Jean Cherney, who's got double hats from H. Pierce and also her senior living business, and she writes for the New Haven Register. I think you probably all know her. Mary Scagliarini, who's one of the supervisors for assisted living services. Vince Raganese, who is one of the owners of Town Pharmacy, one of the most successful independent pharmacies in Brantford. Ed Flamand from Flamand Builders, and he is certified in aging in place, so he can do your whole house and make it safe and wonderful. And Christine Bailey, and she is a gerontologist, and she does memory taking for people and produces beautiful photographs and narratives. And she also worked in the Yale Aging Program. And Lee Check, Gilead, sorry, she is now working for the VNA Community Healthcare also with Barbara. So we thank them for coming and joining us today, and we have other members that we don't all come to all our events, but who represent. You'll see the posters up there that tell you who all the C members are. And every one of these members is dedicated to education, and they all give a lot of time. So we thank them for that. So tonight we have a really special treat. Two wonderful presenters, Barbara Katz from the VNA Community Healthcare, and Dr. Steve Wolfson, who's a very renowned cardiologist, and I heard the most wonderful compliment about him the other day. I was talking to Mary Tinetti at the Adler Center, and she said, "Oh, Steve Wolfson, he's the best gerontologist there is." So, but he really is a cardiologist, so he has a wonderful reputation for the way he is with his patients. And he's been helping many of us who are in a group here with the VNA that are trying to, again, educate people about how to handle their own health care. Anyway, so Steve, he was educated in New York at Columbia, New York University School of Medicine, and then he did his senior residence in medicine at that other place in Massachusetts. I think it's Harvard. And he's been an associate clinical professor of medicine at Yale University School of Medicine for quite some time now, since 1978. You probably also see that he writes articles for the New Haven Register also many times, wonderful things. If I listed all his honors, we'd spend the whole night doing that, because I've got 2 full pages of all the honors that he has been presented with. But I did want you to know that he was president of the medical staff at Yale New Haven Hospital. He is president of the New Haven County Medical Association, and he's now vice chair of the Council of State of Connecticut Medical Society, of the State of Connecticut Medical Society. So those are pretty wonderful, wonderful honors. And the one wonderful thing about Steve is he's always willing to help different groups if they're promoting good education and good medicine. So we're really delighted to have him with us tonight. And Barbara Katz, who actually is one of our C members also, she's an RN MSN, and she's director of the clinical program development at the VNA Community Healthcare. She has a million hats. She's responsible for marketing, business development, caregiver support net group, and community health promotion. She is a graduate of the Yale School of Nursing. She's been a family nurse practitioner, a healthcare manager, and a trainer and development consultant. She's an author of a book on training, the Healthcare Quality Toolkit. She is a co-developer and instructor of the VNA CHC Motivational Interviewing / Patient Self-Management Training Program, and has been active in the agency's Clinical Culture Change Initiative, and that's what we're all about tonight, a change initiative. So without any more, I'm going to turn the program over to Barbara and Steve Katz.
Thanks, Bernadette. I'm a little bit vertically challenged, so hopefully you can all see me. My lovely assistant here, Joanne, is going to be running the slides. Joanne is also from the Visiting Nurse Association, and she's in charge of our Caregiver Support Network. If you're caring for somebody else, a friend or a family member, Joanne is someone who can help you out. So tonight, Steve and I are going to be talking about putting yourself in charge of your own health. And go ahead, Joanne. The big buzz in healthcare these days, if you're not in healthcare, you probably haven't heard this term. It's called patient engagement. Every organization, healthcare organization on the planet wants to engage patients in their own healthcare. It's taken us quite a long time to figure out that we health professionals cannot do it all by ourselves. So now we've finally decided we need your help. And that help is, comes through patient engagement and a dialogue with health professionals. So this is one definition. You have this handout in your packet, and I'll go through, so you have it if you want to look at it later. So according to the Center for Advancing Health, engaged patients, or those who take active charge of their health, take actions to obtain the greatest benefit from the healthcare services available to them. Next slide. And there are a number of skills, actually. It takes quite a lot of skill to be an engaged and active patient. And this is a list of the different skills that the Center for Advancing Health feels that you, if you're going to be an engaged patient, should have. Of these skills, we're going to talk, Steve and I are really going to focus on one tonight, and that is communicating with healthcare professionals. Because pretty much all the others are based on that. First, you have to find competent help, healthcare help, and then you have to be able to have a dialogue to talk about what you want and need and to give and get medical information, vital medical information. Otherwise, you can't do all the rest of this stuff properly because you have to have the knowledge and the information. So I thought this was an interesting quote. The executive director of the Center for Advancing Health is a medical editor named Jessie Grubman. She is a woman who has had cancer 3 times, most recently in the last couple of years. Her previous experiences were 20 years ago and 30 years ago. And this is a comment she made in a foreword to a study about patient engagement. Of course, the technology had changed, but what had also changed dramatically were the expectations, often unstated, of what I had to do to care for myself. I'm not alone in being surprised at my new responsibilities. Many other people also report being confused and overwhelmed. I think what she was saying in a nutshell is, we've come a long way from the days of Marcus Welby. In those days, Dr. Welby wasn't expecting a dialogue with his or her patients. Now, health professionals really okay. So this is research about how well we're doing in being engaged patients. So some of this research shows us that 50% of Medicare patients do not bring a list of questions to their medical appointment. 40% of people sometimes bring a list of medications when they see their doctor. About 25% never do. 20% of Medicare patients report that they passively follow their health professional's lead. And 21% higher healthcare costs for patients who have the least skill and confidence in actively managing their own health care. So it's not only dangerous to not manage your health care, it's awfully expensive as well. So there's some real incentives to do a better job at this. Okay? Yes?
Oh, why? Where does that expense come from?
Well, because repeated medical tests from not communicating about tests that have already been done, duplicate medications, unnecessary surgery, etc., etc., etc. So that's where the cost comes in. And that comes from not really knowing what's going on with your healthcare. Sometimes. Sometimes there are other reasons for that. So let's take a little quiz. I'm just going to ask for a show of hands on this. I'm going to say the statement and you tell me if it's true or false. Your doctors share information about your condition, your treatment, and your medications. True?
With whom?
With each other.
Oh,
True? How many say false? Okay, half and half. All right. We'll tell you the answer in a minute. Steve's going to talk at length about this. At least one of your doctors has a complete set of all your medical information. True?
True.
Okay, how many say false? Okay. Doctors will usually give you all the information that you need without your asking. True? False? Okay, we have unanimous vote on that one. Okay. So, the first one, your doctors share information about your condition, your treatments, and your medication. Steve, true or false? Just going to hedge his bets. The answer probably is sometimes. Not all doctors share all information with each other, partially because they don't know who each other is.
Right. Yeah.
They don't always know, doctors don't always know who else you're seeing.
And there's a lot of danger in that.
Absolutely, there really is.
I mean, I experienced it personally.
Yep, there is a danger in that.
There has to be communication with, and particularly the primary care.
Right.
Primary care is the GC of your health care. And
Yep.
he's supposed to know all.
Well, he's supposed to, but we'll get to that in a minute. So at least one of your doctors has a complete set of all your medical information. True? Probably not if you see multiple doctors. It used to be when things were simpler and your internist or your GP took care of everything, he probably did have a pretty good set. Nowadays, when we have a lot of specialists for different things, one specialist has one set, the other has the other set. So probably unlikely that one doctor, unless that's the only doctor you see, has every single piece of medical information.
But the primary care, that's what the primary care is supposed to do, coordinate all this specialist stuff.
Supposed to, yes.
Everything should be phoned back to him.
Right.
Okay, so when you go to him, he's supposed to have everything in front of him. All right? And a lot of times that's not the case.
It is not the case.
Decision-making is very critical.
Yep. Okay. So there are reasons why that doesn't always happen. And Steve may want to elaborate on that a little bit. But for one thing, primary care doctors call their work the hamster wheel because they are so overwhelmed with all the stuff that they have to do. They say it's like being in a hamster wheel. So it used to be they could keep on top of this stuff better. Now it's a little harder. Electronic medical records may or may not make a big difference in this. We're not sure yet. And we can, before we end, we can talk a little bit about something that Yale New Haven Hospital has started, which is called EPIC. And it has a part to it called My Chart, where you can actually go in and look at your own medical record, which can be very helpful if you're willing to do that and interested in doing that.
But any procedure you have done, always get the records, x-rays, the whole thing, so you have your own personal.
It's good to do that, yeah.
To do that.
Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, Steve, you want to talk about what it sounds like from a doctor's point of view?
We're going to go into this specifically. In fact, we have a video to demonstrate this that I hope you will enjoy. But a few things. I'd like to describe an extreme in order to make the point that Barbara has just been going into. I had a patient years ago who about 2 weeks before an upcoming appointment would send me a letter in which he would describe his current problems and describe his expectations for the visit he would have with me. He would then come to the appointment with a complete list of all his staff of physicians, a complete list of his medications, and a list of about 6 or 7 questions he wanted me to ask. The visit would happen, and then about a week later, I would get a critique in writing as to whether I had or had not lived up to his expectations and answered all of his questions. Well, I learned a lot from that. He was, as I said, the extreme. There's a whole spectrum. There are people who come not knowing what any of the medications are, not knowing the names or addresses of any of their physicians, and giving me very little input about what their needs are at that time. I often have to do a lot of phone calls and a lot of faxing in order to treat these patients. And I really think that it's important for me to ask you to help us. You're the experts. You know how you feel. You know what problems are important to you. You know what medications you take. You know how much they cost and whether you can or cannot afford to buy them. You know what you fear and you know what you want. There's no way for any physician to find that out except if you tell us. So in short, help us help you. We need this information. And that's what we will be developing this evening.
So Steve and I and some other folks in the room are part of a group called the Shoreline Health Neighborhood. This is a coalition of community healthcare and eldercare providers. We come from areas as diverse as a health department, senior centers, senior housing, nursing homes, home care association, private home care, geriatric care managers. And we received a grant from a group called the Connecticut Foundation for Better Health, which actually came out of the New Haven County Medical Group. So this was really funded by doctors to start. Our project is our goal is to reduce hospital readmissions and help people stay independent as long as they possibly can. Besides patient engagement, the other big thing in healthcare now is reducing readmissions. When you go to the hospital and you come out, we do not want you to go back, and neither do you, because hospitals are scary places and they're expensive, and hospitals are now being fined. They're being penalized for people being readmitted unnecessarily. So we're working on this problem at a lot of different levels. This is a community project. And what we've done is develop a program around what's called health literacy. Now, Steve described a patient who's extremely health literate. Somebody who really knew what he wanted, knew how to express his needs, knew how to get his information. Not everybody is willing or capable of doing what Steve's patient did, nor would a lot of people want to be that assertive, so to speak. But there is...
Obsessive is the word.
Obsessive, okay, I didn't want to be. I didn't want to.
He was obsessive.
Okay. But he kept you on your toes.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so Joanne, next slide, please. This is the poster for the project, and if you can't read it, it says, "Does your doctor have a crystal ball?" And the caption says, "Does Mrs. Smith understand all the side effects of this new medication?" A lot of people really think their doctor has a crystal ball and knows what you know, what you don't know, what medications you're taking, what you're not taking. Let me tell you, when the home care, the visiting nurses go out to the house a lot of times, boy, what a big surprise it is when they ask people to open the cupboard and see what's really in there compared to the medication list that the doctor has sent that they're supposed to be taking. So your doctor has no clue. Very often, I'm not saying you, many people's doctors have no clue. Very often the nurse will call and report the list of medications, and the doctor will say, didn't know about even half of those, because so many doctors are prescribing different things. So that's the focus of this campaign. We're trying to get people to put themselves in charge. We want them to speak up, to ask questions, and to be prepared. And there's a couple of simple actions that you can take to make this happen. Can you go to the next one? So the put yourself in charge steps are, first of all, to bring a friend or a relative to a medical appointment with you. When you're scared, when you're tired, when you're stressed, very hard to listen and get all the information you need. I guess for more routine appointments, maybe it's not so important, but if it's something really serious, if you have multiple medical conditions, 2 sets of ears are always better than 1. And in the video, you'll see how that works. Secondly, bring a list of all your medications, or actually bring the medications in a bag so your doctor can see them. Medications, now you mentioned your primary care doctor. It's the primary care doctor who really needs to see all the medications. All the other doctors do too, but he or she is the one that's supposed to be keeping the master list. So that's where it's really, really important. And another step is to bring a list of all your health professionals. Steve doesn't necessarily know who your pulmonologist is, or who your kidney specialist is, or your endocrinologist. You would have to tell him that. Because when we first started the health neighborhood, we had this misconception that Steve had to correct. We thought doctors were sending letters to each other. You know, that Steve would see a patient for that Dr. So-and-so referred, and there were letters going back and forth. Not always. Am I right?
Not always.
Sometimes. Sometimes. I have...
The specialists usually do it. It is rare, however, for the primary care physician.
Right. I have to say that was a big shocker for all of us, and we're health professionals. We really thought this was happening. And then shortly after that, I talked to an elderly friend of mine who has a lot of very serious illnesses, and I said, well, Carl, how do you keep yourself busy? He said, keep myself busy. I'm on the phone all the time, calling one doctor's office to tell him what the other office said.
Yeah, but isn't that it's a coordination problem?
It absolutely is.
Okay, so what's the definition of a primary care then? Isn't the primary care supposed to have all the information about you?
Theoretically, yes.
And then all that information should come to there.
Yeah.
His office should be set up to get all this information.
Right.
And protect you from over-medication or bad diagnosis and all those kind of things. So the primary care, I'm targeting the primary care because he's the guy who runs everything, all right?
Right.
And if he doesn't get the information, or if he doesn't give the information, we're
Well,
all lost.
Let's talk about the reality versus the ideal. In an ideal world, that would happen. Exactly right. However, until recently, primary care doctors didn't get paid for making all those phone calls and writing all those
And that's why it's
letters
not
and
getting done.
coordinating all that care, and so they were focused on seeing patients in the office, understandably. Now, recently, Medicare has changed its payment policies, and now there is a payment for care coordination. So hopefully that will help a little bit. Still not going to create more time.
Yeah,
So-
I understand the nature of what we're doing.
Yeah.
You have to be active in your own health.
Absolutely.
Because you can catch something like that,
That's right.
all right?
So you like to be able to depend on your primary care to manage it all. They probably manage some of it, maybe not 100%.
Right.
But what's coming down the road is what's called the primary care medical home, which actually even the state is trying to incent doctors to do, which means that it would be more like the old-fashioned medical practice where they have all your information, they have a nurse that can follow up, they call you to see how you're doing after you've been in the hospital, that kind of thing. We're not there yet, but we're moving in that direction. It's sort of deja vu all over again. We're going back
Yeah, right.
to the way things used to be, I hope.
Well, some of those practices should be the same.
Right. Okay, so these are the steps, and then the last one is ask questions at your appointment. Now, within your packet, you've got a toolkit to use if you care to. One of the tools is the File of Life, which you can put up on your refrigerator. Got a place to put all your meds and a list of your providers. It's the most basic thing that you need. The other tool is in the back. There are a bunch of different things in here, but there's a list, medication list, and a doctor list. This is one, you made this up, didn't you, Steve? This is one that Steve made up. So you can use that if you want. Some people just use a notebook. A lot of people actually. You know those old-fashioned black and white notebooks? That's what they do. They just write it down in there. And then there's a little card that looks like this that has questions to take with you to ask at a medical appointment. So those are the tools, simple stuff. Okay, go down, next one. All right, so we're gonna show you some videos. Steve is the star of the video, along with some other real people. And we're gonna show you three scenarios. And then there's 3 parts to each of these. In the first, you're gonna see a less than ideal situation. Then Steve, who's the announcer, will explain what happened and how it could have worked differently. And then you're gonna see the situation replayed again, maybe being done a little more effectively. So if you give us a second to change up the slides, we'll get the videos up and you can take a look.
Hi, Mrs. Adams. What brings you here today?
Well, Dr. Wilson, these new yellow pills I take every day seem to be making me dizzy.
I'm glad my secretary asked you to bring them in. Looking at them, I'm not surprised that you had trouble. This is a diuretic, which is very similar to a medication that I prescribed for you some months ago. You've basically been taking a double dose of the same medication.
I just take what my doctors prescribe.
Well, the problem is, I didn't know that you were seeing Dr. Garcia or what he was prescribing for you. And he didn't know that I was involved or what I was prescribing. This scene shows what can happen when a patient is not communicating with doctors about all medications prescribed. There is no one central medical record, so doctors don't always know who else a patient is seeing. This can result in double doses of similar medications or in taking medications that just don't mix. Doctors may also order tests or treatments that have already been ordered by other doctors. To avoid these problems, 1. Bring a list of all your medications to each appointment, or simply put all your pills in a bag and bring them to your visit. 2. Write down a list of all your health professionals and bring it to every appointment. Here are some simple tools that you can use to get this information to your doctor. Hello, Mrs. Adams. What brings you here today?
Hi, Dr. Wilson. My orthopedist prescribed these new yellow pills for me. When I take them, they make me feel dizzy. Your nurse suggested I bring in all my medications so you could review them.
I'm glad she did that. Looking at them, it's clear that you didn't really need the new medication. It's a diuretic, and it's very similar to something that I had prescribed for you some months ago. In addition, your blood pressure and your heart condition have really been well controlled.
That's a relief. I take too many medications as it is.
Actually, the problem is that I didn't know that you're seeing Dr. Garcia. I'll give him a call. If we consult together, I think we can avoid problems like this in the future.
I thought his records automatically went to you.
I wish that were the case. Someday there may be a common record that is shared among all doctors and all hospitals, but it hasn't happened yet. Until it does happen, what you should do to protect yourself is to make up a list of your medications and your doctors and bring those with you whenever you come to see us. Hello, Mrs. Adams. I'm glad you made it to your hospital discharge appointment. While you were in the hospital, we discovered that you have what is called heart failure.
That sounds kind of scary.
It is serious. If we don't treat it carefully, you could land back in the hospital.
I'll do whatever you say.
While you were in the hospital, did the nurses give you a list of medications and instructions about diet?
Yes, but
Well, if you'll follow those, you should do fine. You look good today. I'll see you again in a month.
okay, I guess I can do that.
This scene shows what can happen when patients with a serious illness come to a medical appointment alone and do not assert their needs. Appointments are short, and professionals try to pack in as much information as possible. Patients are often scared or ill and may not be able to absorb all the information and are not comfortable asking questions. To avoid this problem, bring along a friend or relative who can listen, ask questions, and make notes. Together with your friend or relative, 1. Get all the details of your health problem and how serious it is. 2. Ask questions about tests and treatment choices. 3. Write down and remember medical instructions. Hello, Mrs. Adams.
Hello, Dr. Wolfson. This is my granddaughter, Jenny. She came with me today to listen and help me ask questions.
What a good idea. 2 heads are better than 1. Nice to meet you.
Could we start with a few questions my grandma had from her last visit? Grandma, why don't you tell Dr. Wilson what you were confused about?
Well, how serious is this heart problem? And the medicine you gave me will cure it, won't it?
Well, heart failure is quite serious. If it's not treated aggressively, you can land back in the hospital. There is actually no cure for heart failure, but we really should be able to control it with the medications.
Well, how serious is my grandmother's case?
As heart failure goes, it's mild, which is all the more reason for us to get on top of it, stay on top of it, and see to it that it doesn't get worse.
Thank you for explaining that. Grandma told me she wasn't sure of what to look for and when to call if her symptoms change. Could you explain that, Dr. Wilson?
Another good question. You should start by weighing yourself daily at roughly the same time and roughly the same degree of clothing each day. That way you can call me if you gain more than 3 pounds in a day, if you develop more breathlessness or more leg swelling.
That's a lot for Grandma to remember. Could you give us some sort of handout?
Sure. This chart will tell you when to call me and when to call 911. I think I'll ask the visiting nurses to drop in on you. They can visit you regularly for a while, check on your medications, instruct you further about diet, and make sure that you are doing everything you can to help yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Wolfson. It's scary to know you have a serious health problem, but now I understand better how to take care of it.
I'm glad. Hi, Mrs. Adams. How are you doing? Your granddaughter, she was with you last time. Couldn't come today?
Oh, no, she's sick and she couldn't come today.
I'm sorry to hear that. How have you been doing since you were discharged from the hospital?
Well, I get a little short of breath if I move too fast. And my ankles swell sometimes, but not enough to call you about.
Given those symptoms and your tests, I think it's time for a stronger medication. Tell me, do you remember the instructions that the nurses gave you at the hospital?
I remember everything the nurses taught me, and I'll do whatever you say.
Okay. Here's your new prescription. Take one of these each day in the morning. It'll make you urinate more frequently, but it shouldn't cause any troubles. And I'll see you again in a month.
Oh, doctor.
Yes?
Oh, nothing. I know how busy you are. I'll ask you next time.
Okay. This patient simply did not ask enough questions. Patients who don't understand their health problems and treatment can't care for themselves properly. Passive patients may later remember questions they forgot or were afraid to ask. Then they will have to call the doctor again. By not asking questions, patients may get confused about instructions, may not prepare for tests properly, or may take medications in the wrong way. Patients who don't ask about tests or treatment may have tests they are not sure they need, or may take medications they are not comfortable with. To avoid these problems, bring a small card or notebook of key questions. Write down your own questions before you go on the visit. To be sure your doctor makes time for your questions, say at the start of the visit, "Before I go today, I have some questions that I would like to discuss with you." Be sure to ask these key questions. 1. What is my main health problem? 2. What do I need to do? 3. Why is it important for me to do this? 4. What symptoms would be important for me to report before our next visit? 5. Do any of my medications need to change? Hello, Mrs. Adams. Hello, Jenny. It's good to see you both here today.
My grandma left her last visit a little bit confused. Would it be possible to take some time to answer a few questions?
Of course. I know these sessions can seem rushed, but there's so much information we have to exchange. Please.
Grandma, you have the little card. Go ahead and ask them.
Dr. Wolfson, what exactly is this problem you're treating me for?
It's called heart failure. I know that sounds scary, and it is serious, but we can control it with medications. What it means is that the heart muscle has been weakened by the 2 heart attacks that you've had. The heart is a little enlarged. It doesn't pump as efficiently as it has in the past, and therefore some fluid can back up into the lungs to cause breathlessness or into the legs to cause swelling.
What do I need to do to treat it?
Primarily take the medications as they're prescribed. I'll ask one of our nurses to sit down with you before you leave and help you generate a list of your medications and also make sure that you understand them all. And it would really be helpful if you would avoid salt in your food. Salt makes the body hold on to water, which means even more volume for the heart to be pumping around.
Why is it important for my grandma to do these things?
Well, we want her heart to function as efficiently as possible and to avoid getting any weaker. I guess the primary goal is to keep you out of the hospital.
I'm not sure always when to call you. What symptoms would be important to report back to you before our next visit?
You should promptly report any increase in breathlessness or leg swelling. You should also weigh yourself daily in the morning after you've gone to the bathroom but before you eat, and report to me if you gain 3 or more pounds from one day to the next.
Are you going to change any of my medicines? The last one cost so much I'm not sure I can get the next prescription filled.
Oh, I'm really glad that you brought that up. What I can do is to prescribe a generic drug that will do the same things for you, but will cost less.
Oh, I'm glad I brought it up too. It's been worrying me.
Good.
After a round of applause. So that's an example of a very common situation that occurs in medical visits. Yes?
I have found lately over the last few years that every time I go to any of the 3 or 4 doctors, dermatologist, my principal doctor and dermatologist and eye doctor, each one, the nurse, when you go in, she either gives you a sheet that you fill out your medication, or she has the list and says what she's going to take your blood pressure and that sort of thing, waiting for the doctor to come into the room. She goes over them with you. Are you still taking this, that, and that? And that only takes a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
to do
that's
that.
good. That's perfect.
It could be that the physicians that you're seeing do have a common medical record. That's how
I think so, because the primary doctor referred me to the other, so.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they share a record.
No, it doesn't
But
necessarily.
if she already had your list of medications, either she's going by the list that you generated on your previous visit, or she actually there's a common record shared between you, between your dermatologist and your primary care physician.
Even dentists do that now. They have you, what are your medications?
Right. When I go to the dentist, I get asked that question. It's rare for dentists and physicians to be on the same medical record, unfortunately.
But they ask at least.
Yeah.
Jane?
I'm going to be a strong advocate because I learned something. I thought I was pretty astute. And my heart specialist, Dr. Steve Jacoby, asks me to actually bring medications. And I found, much to my own surprise, I had mixed in an older medication that he had prescribed that was a stronger, and he had then prescribed something weaker for me, and I had them both in the box. And yet, in terms of a list, there was one medication listed. So my thinking has changed. I realized that I should bring all of the actual medications. It makes a difference. You can make a mistake on your list.
That's a very good point. I'm speaking too softly. It's really critical these days, particularly if you have gone in and out of the hospital. Are you familiar with the term formulary?
Yeah.
Okay. Each of our insurance companies has a formulary, which means that they have worked out deals with the pharmaceutical manufacturers and have obtained the cheapest ones, and that's what's on the formulary. The hospitals also have a formulary, and it's different. So when you go into the hospital, even if it's for a simple procedure and none of your medications change, they will change anyway. Because the formulary is being slightly different, you will get alternatives. When you leave the hospital, the same problem may occur if prescriptions are written for you in the hospital. They may write for you the medications that you were given in the hospital rather than what you had at home. The corrective would be a post-hospital visit with your primary care physician or with the specialist who took care of you in the hospital and bring all the pills. And I'll tell you, this one is the same as this one, get rid of that. It's important to do this. It's called medication reconciliation. And it really reflects the fact that going in and out of the hospital means crossing 2 international borders. You need vaccination certificates, a visa, and preferably an on-guard in order to do it. It's a dangerous time when you are changing sites of care, changing physicians who are caring for you, and potentially changing your medications as well. Protect yourself.
Thank you.
When you are in a situation where you've been, you're taking medication from one formulary, and then you go in the hospital, let's say, it's the medication you get, it could actually be a different medication, not generically the same.
There are very few medications for which there is only one chemical drug. And those are usually the new brand names for which there are no generic equivalents. The pharmaceutical industry has if they had a motto and a flag, it would have Me Too in there as well. So as soon as one drug that comes out that is effective for a particular purpose, every other manufacturer feels they need to bring out their own version of that drug. And so what we usually have are 6 or 7 generic equivalents and 1 or 2 new brand names that all do the same thing. It leads to a lot of confusion and potentially a lot of medical errors that can harm people.
One of the people in each community I have found who really is helpful is a pharmacist. Now, when we change our Medicare provider each year, and there are different formularies for each provider, and suddenly you're taking a pink pill instead of a blue pill, you can go to your pharmacist and you can say, is this equivalent, or what would you say about the difference? And for instance, in one situation with myself, the pharmacist said, well, it is different and it isn't as effective. So talk to your doctor about this. And when I talked to her about this, she wrote a letter to the insurance provider and said that she wanted me to stay on the brand name because she also knew that the equivalent wasn't really equivalent.
The Raganese family thanks you on behalf of the town pharmacy for that unsolicited praise, but it is justified.
If the drug isn't equal, then how can they say this is the alternative? This is exactly the same as this. Now, people are under the impression that the generic is exactly the same as the name drug, and it's not. If it's not, then it shouldn't be characterized as that.
In most cases, it is the same. And frankly, there's a lot to be said for the generic drugs. If they are generic, that means that the patent has run. That means they've been out for 20 years. There are no more surprises. And one of the problems with brand names, particularly if they are new, in the current setting, they are cleared by the FDA. They are then marketed to all of us, and we then wind up finding out what the minor or major complications of that drug are. It's become an official term, the post-marketing period. And a lot of problems crop up during the post-marketing period. One of the philosophies that I've adapted over the years is that I rarely am the first person to use a new brand name drug, because so many of them present with problems during the post-marketing period.
The other thing I wanted to comment on, I have tried to find out with generic drugs where they're manufactured.
Oh, yes.
I do not want a generic drug that is manufactured from certain countries. I just don't. And it was very difficult to try to trace where this generic drug was made. Is there a way to do that?
It's hard. It's hard. One of the, we have to accept the fact that in addition to the United Nations, the corporation span the globe as well. And they can manufacture them in one place and label them in another. And so it is often very hard to find that out.
But in the manufacturing process, if a company develops a medication and they have a patent on it, okay, the patent goes off, okay, now a generic company wants to make that drug. That drug has to be built exactly with the same ingredients as the original. right?
That is correct.
And that's why the lady wants to know where the stuff is being built at, because maybe they're maybe putting something else in it and playing with it, to make it cheaper for them to
And
manufacture.
there also may be differences in the diluent that goes in,
Right.
in the fillers, and in the coloring of the pill.
And how efficient
And those-
the lab is.
The official term is bioavailability. The generic and the brand name may have the same dosages, but may not produce the same blood levels. Again, for most of them, it works and it's fine. And frankly, a drug that you can afford, will actually buy and use, is preferable to one that you cannot afford, do not buy, and do not use.
Yeah,
And so wherever possible, I tend to prescribe the generic drugs.
yeah, but the lady makes a good point. If you don't know where it's coming from, it could be really a bad lab. It's the same thing with blood work. I mean, you can get a blood work in a bad lab, and you compare one blood work to different labs, you're going to have a different thing.
Even the pharmaceutical manufacturers are human.
Yeah,
Yes,
there was
Bob.
an article in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if anybody read it, about how the FDA is now going to other countries
Yes.
to certify the manufacturers,
Right.
because there's so many counterfeit drugs coming
Yes.
from
No,
India.
they don't have enough personnel to
Yeah.
oversee it all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great if they'd label where,
Yes.
like they do with clothing, where your clothes come from.
That's very important.
Different law.
Yes, Jane.
Dr. Wolfson, with all due respect to doctors who I know are under a lot of time constraints, in terms of good communication, I find if I go to a doctor who is on the computer recording at the same time that I'm trying to have a conversation, I find that very disconcerting. I wish they would find the time to do it after the conversation. I don't think I'm the only patient who feels that way.
I feel that way, but I finished recording my charts. I'm on Epic, and I can do it from home. I finished at 10:30 last night, finishing for the patients whom I saw yesterday. It is difficult, and like in everything else, you have to balance things. But you're right, that eye contact is important. I hate
Their
it.
back is toward you and they're recording, and I just feel.
I hate that.
Do they have to, doctors, is that required now that they put it on their little?
Oh, it's required that it go into the computer, but
Yes.
it doesn't have to be while you're talking.
Maybe they forget them. How do
They
you
should get
remember
voice
what it
recognition.
was?
I take notes.
Or some of them do it right
Yeah,
after.
remember pencils? I use pencils.
Or not, they do it right
I
after.
think those, yes.
When, if doctor's on overload, at a particular hospital that they're working at, doesn't some kind of board says, well, you can only see but so many patients a day because you're going to get burnt out.
You're
There's too many
confusing
patients.
one thing. That only applies to house officers. Once you've graduated from residency, all bets are off.
Yeah, well, see,
Yes.
I'm speaking to what the lady was saying.
Yes.
I was going to say, Peter and I left our primary care physician over that issue. And we had asked him twice to please face us, that we needed to talk to him. And he just didn't. He just kept his back to us on the computer the whole time and would not communicate. Whereas early on, we were with him for 12 years. Early on, it wasn't like that at all. And so you can request that of your physician. And because he wasn't willing to do that, we found another physician.
I agree with you.
Frankly, I agree with you as well. For the record, my computer is between me and the patient,
Yeah.
so that I can look up and look down.
Right. And
Yes.
there are ways of doing it.
There's one other problem which I encountered once. and that is the hospitalist model. My doctor could not actually go into the hospital and help deal with the problem I was experiencing because it had to be dealt with by the hospitalist, someone who did not know a thing about me. And it was kind of, well, it was really disconcerting. It was not a satisfactory experience at all.
It's unfortunately a part of the medical scene. The way that payments for healthcare are structured, primary care physicians really, the only way that they can stay in business is by seeing a lot of patients in the office. They can sit in their office with their staffs coordinating things, and in a very relatively short period of time, they can see a lot of patients. If they go to the hospital, first of all, it takes time to get there. Then they have to park. Then they have to find their way to the floor where the patient is staying. And then finally, they have to spend time with the hospital's computer system, and they may or may not be familiar with it, and then they have to drive back to their office. It's become economically very difficult. I can count on the fingers of one finger the primary care internists who are still going to the hospital. The pediatricians are still digging in and still continuing that tradition. And frankly, I wish that everyone did. But the other direction from which this change has occurred is that the hospitals make a profit on the hospitalists. In addition, they get paid a certain amount for every disease, and therefore a long hospitalization, they get no additional money for the extra days. A hospitalist is very familiar with the hospital and its procedures. They can move the patient through very efficiently. So there's a distinct benefit to the hospital, but like everything else, it gets driven by economics. Yes, sir?
I have a question that was maybe off topic a little bit, but could you define what a healthcare advocate is?
Okay.
What is the
Could you
question?
repeat the question?
Yes. The gentleman is asking what a healthcare advocate is. First of all, there is one healthcare advocate who is an official of the state government. I think it's Vicki Veltri right now. And that is an office to which you can send complaints, and they will follow up on things. And they have been very effective in helping people obtain redress for problems that they encounter within the healthcare system. There are also a variety of names that you might as well learn because you're going to be encountering them more and more. One is the patient navigator. This is an approach that was pioneered by one of the organizations that I've been affiliated with, Project Access, which is a non-for-profit set up by physicians to obtain free health care for uninsured, low-income people in the New Haven area. And we've now obtained a lot of grant funding in order to set up patient navigators who will sit in our office and help these patients who are very unsophisticated about the healthcare system navigate through the maze. That same model has now been picked up by some of the by an independent practice association in the area, the New Haven Community Medical Group. And some of the insurers are also adopting it, recognizing the fact that getting from your primary care physician to your cardiologist to your pulmonologist to the hospital and out of the hospital is very difficult. Another term that you may hear about are the community health workers. And these are people in the community who will actually make home visits, identify barriers to care, communicate with physicians about the problems that they identify, and help patients in that direction. Hillary Clinton said a while ago about raising children, it takes a village. Well, it also takes a village to deliver health care because it has gotten much more complicated. When I was an intern and resident, there were maybe 2 cardiac medications that we had, digoxin and a lousy diuretic called mercurhydrin. Now there are thousands. I once encountered one of the cardiology fellows at Yale New Haven with her head down on the desk at the hospital crying. I said, "What's happened? Eleanor, what's the matter?" She had a baby, had taken 3 months off for maternity leave, and she said, "Now I've come back and I'm obsolete. There are 3 new antiarrhythmic drugs and I don't know anything about them." It's really what's been happening. It does take a village.
That's good, isn't it?
It's good and it's bad. It takes more effort and more training and more physicians and more physician specialists to deliver the health care that we've got right now. During my lifetime in medicine, coronary bypass surgery came into being, and subsequently angioplasty. And since then, there are all sorts of procedures that are used for abnormal heart rhythms. None of those existed.
It's good to have them.
It's wonderful to have them. But now, a cardiologist used to be just a cardiologist. Now there are invasive cardiologists, non-invasive cardiologists, and electrophysiologists. So there are subspecialists within cardiology. And that's happening in almost, when was the last time you were to an orthopedist? Didn't he tell you, "You've got a knee problem, you need to see my partner"? Well, years ago, they used to take care of everything. But now the procedures have become so specialized that even within a specialty, there are subspecialties.
Yes.
Yes?
When you mentioned the healthcare advocate in Hartford, would they be someone that one would go to if you were admitted to the hospital for observation as opposed to an admission? And you question that?
I would question it at the hospital itself.
All right, but if you couldn't get
Yes.
satisfied that
Yes.
you were being classified as being admitted, is that
Yes.
something you would go to the?
Absolutely.
So they're like an
Absolutely. Well, actually, most hospitals have an ombudsman, and you should ask for that. I think this brings us back to our original point about patient engagement. You really need to advocate for yourself and for your family. The greatest learning experience that I have had as a physician was living with my late wife during her battle with ovarian cancer. I spent a lot of time with her. I went with her to every doctor appointment. I was with her when she was in the clinic. and I asked questions. And I think her care improved as a result. Often she was just, when you're sitting there nauseated, you're not thinking too clearly. Having somebody else there is really important. I think you ought to do it when you go to a lawyer. The same thing. Yes, Jane?
Dr. Wilson, if that brings up a question I have. If you do not have any relatives nearby, and it's a lot sometimes to ask a friend to go, sometimes appointments are long, how do you think most doctors would feel if you brought a recorder to the session?
They wouldn't like it.
No.
Neither does lawyers. I tried that.
Because I have to go alone, and yeah, I
Well,
wondered about bringing a recorder.
I don't have a problem with that.
I should ask.
It means I would need to watch my language.
But
Yes?
I was just,
Bernadette.
a lot of people though, as you described your wife, but also very elderly people, they, just can't be the kind of advocate for themselves that we're talking about. It's beyond that, or they're too nervous or whatever. But I'm a geriatric care manager, and I do that a lot for my clients, and there are other people like that too, who are hospital advocates. They don't, make the big medical decisions, but I know I go to the emergency room all the time, and many people do that kind of work in the emergency rooms, in important doctor's appointments, taking notes, so that people are making good decisions. So there are, there's that.
Do you have information about people in this area who do that, Bernadette?
Yeah.
I think everyone here would welcome that information. There are also eldercare specialists who will help with financial issues as well. Yes, sir.
Anytime you question a doctor, there's a certain level of intimidation in the question. And I noticed a few times that when you start asking hard questions, either they start talking over your head, or they're not interested. And basically, I had one primary care said, well, you should take this drug, and I asked questions about it. She said, well, if you don't take it, and you walk out of the office and you drop dead, don't sue me. What kind of answer is that? So if you ask hard questions, certain doctors get intimidated by it.
If I had that answer from a physician, I would say goodbye.
I would say goodbye, but in your particular case, you being a doctor, there must be all kinds of intimidations from when you question, because you're a doctor. But the average person, they can say, hey, get the hell out of my office, I don't want to know you.
Anyone who does that shouldn't be practicing medicine. Barbara brought up a point earlier, basically asking, would my advice change if the physician did not welcome questions? I think my advice is even more important then. And frankly, you need to assert yourself. If, when you go home, there are questions that come up that you don't feel were answered, ask for another appointment and come in with a list of those questions.
So we're going to have to wrap up pretty soon because we've covered a lot of ground here. Actually, in the PowerPoint, there is a health assertiveness recipe. It's called the DESK technique, and it's a standard assertiveness tool that is describe what you're concerned about. So you might say to a doctor, our last 2 visits were very quick and focused on things that you wanted to tell me. Then express your feelings. When you seem rushed, I feel frustrated and upset because I don't feel comfortable interrupting you to ask questions. Specify what you want to be different. Would you please allow enough time at the visit for me to ask you questions? And then describe possible results or consequences. I will try to come prepared with a list of questions. If you can answer these during my visit, I won't need to call you as often. So it's a way to be assertive without being aggressive with your physician. And I personally practice this myself, and I've found that it works pretty well. So it's something to think about. We're sort of getting short on time, so there are 2 more videos, but there is a way for you to look at them yourselves. And what we have done is to put on the last slide of the PowerPoint the links that you can just put into your computer, and you can go to the Health Neighborhood page and click on the videos and watch them at home yourself when you have some time.
So
And
can you see the earlier programs?
yeah, all 3 of them.
Right.
There's one on the one you saw. There's a second one on bringing an advocate to a visit and what it looks like when you have an advocate and when you don't. And then the third one is about not asking questions first, and then it shows you how to ask them. So I suggest that you do that because it takes a little time to review the videos and process them. There is also a health assertiveness quiz in your packet. So if you want to test yourself privately about how assertive you are, take the quiz and score yourself and see what you think. One last tool that is pretty interesting, and you'll hear more about it, is that VNA Community Healthcare has developed an official partnership with Consumer Reports that are commonly prescribed. And I gave you a link in the PowerPoint to go to our website to give you access to all that. All the information has been put together by medical specialty societies, and it's very interesting. It's some things you would never expect. So I would suggest that you take a look at that too. That's like advanced communication.
Can you tell us exactly where those links are in here?
It is it's on the back page.
Okay.
Back page. And if you have any trouble with any of it, my card is in the packet. Feel free to call me or email me, and I'll help you figure out how to find all this stuff. There's just so much stuff. So I think I'd like to wrap up, if you're agreeable. Steve and I will stay around for some more questions if you like. And I want to leave you with a take-home message. There was a book written about 20 years ago when the patient engagement movement was pretty young, and it was written by a Dr. Marvin Belsky. And he started the book by saying, what I want you to remember: if you want your doctor to stop playing God, you have to get up off your knees. So thank you.
I want to just say we have our brochures here for Shoreline Eldercare Alliance, and there's an insert in there that tells all the members and the specialties that they have, that they do for senior care. And I also have some of these books, Reflections. This was put out by the Yale Divinity School, and the whole issue is on aging. There's a wonderful lead article by Dr. Leo Cooney from the Adler Center. So if anybody, I don't have too many of them, but if you want to take one, you're welcome to do so. And I will collect, or we will collect, those information sheets, and what I'm going to do is sort of shuffle them around, and I have a few door prizes, so if yours gets picked, you'll get a door prize. So please fill them out, because we like to know little things like where you heard about this and all of that. And I want to thank our speakers, Barbara Katz and Dr. Steve Wilson. They were wonderful. And we have a lot of food, so have some more. And they're going to be around so you can ask them some questions. And thank you very much.